Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. In today's episode, we are going to be recording with this. It is the Revival 4000. Now, you saw me do a video with it where I tweaked some knobs and mixed some stuff. Well, I'm going to do a little bit more this time. I'm going to track with it. As you know, as I'm sure you know, this is the Revival of the 4000 channel, hence the Revival 4000. I've been playing with it. I really like it. My 4000 I had for about 20 something years was absolutely incredible. And there was a point where my console was probably worth about, I don't know, $250,000, $500,000 when they were new. The thing is, these are a fraction of the cost now. Electronics has come down in price. Everything is just cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. And what I love about this unit is, well, it has everything. It's completely, you can move between, you know, different EQs. You've got the de-esser from the B series on it. You've got the compression, the expansion. You can do everything that my 4000 could do, and it costs a fraction of a cost. I saw a video today, for instance, of somebody who bought a bucket of, you know, a sidecar of about 8 channels of this, which came to about twice as much as if you had bought 8 channels of this straight off. So, speaking of 8 channels, we have 8 channels. We're going to record drums with it, and we are going to do a cover of one of my favorite songs by one of my favorite ever artists, and that would be Let's Dance by David Bowie, which of course was recorded at the power station on an SSL. So it seems like the perfect thing to do. I'm playing electric guitar on it, I'm playing bass on it. Keys were done by, well, a combination of 2 great guys. David Bennett from David Bennett's Piano. Thank you, David. Chris Ibbotson from the Produce Like a Pro Academy also did a lot of the programming and keys on it, so it was wonderful, those two. We had Michael Harding, who is also a Produce Like a Pro Academy member, do all of the saxes and did an incredible job. The vocals were done by the one and only Mr. Max Kendall, who has done a lot of great videos with us. And I did backgrounds as well, so you're going to hear my R's and my Let's Dance blended with him as well, which is thankful because obviously I'm not a great singer like Max.
The guitar solo was played by the great Jamie Humphries from Six String Alliance. He played that, I believe, between Soundcheck and the show while touring with Brit Floyd on his little Black Star amp. So thank you ever so much, Jamie.
And last but definitely no means least, Mr. Ray Hearn. Yes, Ray Hearn from Haken played all of the drums. So it was an absolute blast to do this with an incredible star-spangled banner of musicians. No, just really wonderful. So without further ado, let's check out the track. Don't forget, as per usual, you can download all the multi-tracks down below.
Shoes and dance the blues. Let's dance to the song they're playing on the radio. Let's sway while color lights up your face. Let's sway, sway through the crowd to an empty space. Say run, I'll run with you. And if you say hide, we'll hide. Because my love for you would break my heart in two. If you should fall into my arms and tremble like a is all. Let's could look into my eyes. Let's sway under the moonlight, the serious moonlight. And if you say run, I'll run with you. And if you say hide, we'll hide. Because my love for you would break my heart in two. If you should fall into my arms and tremble like a flower. Let's dance. Put on your red shoes and dance the blues. Let's sway under the moonlight, the serious moonlight. Let's sway. Let's sway. Let's dance, let's dance, let's dance, let's dance, let's dance. Let's dance.
So as ever, of course, we have the multi-tracks for you to download and play with yourself. If you are a Produce Like a Pro Academy member, we will be reviewing all of the mixes. And if you're not yet a member, please join down below. So we had 8 channels of the Revival 4000 for the drums. Absolutely superb. You've got 2 channels of kick, and what I did is my usual stuff. I got in the 60 Hertz and boosted it. I cut some 350. I put a bit of 2.5 on there, but I also compressed as well. The sound going straight from the channel was absolutely superb. And I mirrored the EQ of both of these channels. So the kick in and the kick out. Now, as for the snare, again, I wasn't afraid to compress it. I compressed the snare going in. I love the sound of SSL compression. I put a little bit of 100 on there and a bit of 7K and above, and just let it sound great going to tape. Or in this case, DAW, but we still say tape. As far as the overheads, just a gentle amount of high passing, just a gentle amount. Just about 60, just to get rid of any low end rumble. Other than that, zero EQ on any of the mics. Let's listen to the tracks. I'm trying as much as possible to only use SSL plugins on the mix. There are a couple of other ones that I use for obvious reasons you're going to hear in a minute. I've got to be honest, this was one of the most fun things I've ever had to do. And even though there's a lot of tracks, because I'm not on tape, so I'm not bouncing all the horns to a stereo pair, for instance. I'm not taking all the backgrounds and bouncing to stereo pairs. So you're going to have a lot more independent control. But even though there are a lot of tracks, there isn't a lot going on them. See how many tracks here that have 0 plugins on them? I've got a group of stuff. I've got some delays, but even on the most complex thing, it's still not that many plugins. There's some plugins there, but there's a lot there isn't. Why is that? Well, it's because I used the SSL on the way in. I grew up on the music of SSL 4000s, as many of us did. And I think up until about 20 years ago, everything was mixed on them, like everything. And then it sort of tailed off a little bit over the last 20 years. But the reality is that the sweet high end of an SSL 4000 is very beautiful. Just the way that we love low end on other consoles. We love the high end. I also love the channel out button on a 4000, which basically means you go EQ into compression. It adds a certain spank. But what I really wanted to do was record everything the way I wanted to hear it. So on the bass, for instance, I'm just not as aggressive as I normally would be with the EQ split between the amp and the DI, because I printed it the way I wanted to with the 4000. It's my Yamaha, as you saw me playing. It's a little bright. Even though I played it with my fingers, it's got a little bit of a slappiness to it. We blended that in with the synth bass, which our good friend Chris Ebertson did, who's one of our Produce Like a Pro Academy members. Here's the synth bass with it. And to exaggerate it, we've got a bass picked sound. Have a listen to this on its own. Put those two together. Add in the real bass. It's awesome. And you heard the drums going down. I was really, really happy tracking drums through the 4000 channels, all 8 of them. Trusty BB, it's the Peter Hook model. Very happy with it. Everything flat, going straight into the Revival 4000 through the DI, of course, but compression, no EQ, just the DI. I might, when I come to mix it, use 2 different elements, but that would just be me splitting up the DI and separating it into 2 elements to kind of get the low end and the articulation on the top. All right, let's have a go. Cool. So the threshold is up on the bass here. Continuously variable ratio between 1:1 and always used to be 10:1. So basically compression to limiting. Put around somewhere around there. Now the fast attack, got to remember when you select the fast attack, it will grab it a lot more aggressively. So I'm going to let that initial transient go through. My release time, obviously super slow. I always keep it relatively fast. Okay, EQ wise, if I put the EQ in, everybody underestimates the low end on an SSL bit. Take it out. Back in. Put it on the bell. It's really tasty. Totally underestimated on bass. High frequency's not set in. I love the way you can go between black. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go for some of the mids. So I can... Gorgeous. I can go and widen up that Q. So it's just more of a mid-range. Take it out. Back in. Maybe I can go for some high-end pick noise here. I don't need any of the high-end pick range at all, so I'm taking it off. I've got the dynamic set post EQ, so whatever I boost is going straight into that. So if I went nuts, it's compressing more. Take that out, probably going to blow up everything. Yep. Total distortion. So you can choose, if I engage that, now it's going EQ into compression, which we can try out on some drums in a minute, will really give us that spanky SSL tone. Solo the drums. Now, I spoke to Omar Hakim just via text, but I texted him while we were doing this. And I'd watched a breakdown. I think it was Rick Beato's breakdown, and he'd broken down the song. The multi-tracks he had, which, you know, probably the Guitar Hero ones, had like a slap delay on the kick, it seemed. And I couldn't hear that in the actual finished version of Let's Dance. So I texted Omar and I said, Omar, do you remember having like a delay on the kick? And he goes, no, there's no delay on the kick. So I don't know why they would have done that when they were making the Guitar Hero stems, but they did. Maybe there was a reason. The snare sounds great. The bottom together. So all I'm doing on this is, well, quite a bit at 150 boost. Take it off. Using the SSL gate. Get a decent amount of compression on it. I mean, I'm treating it exactly as I would if I was just mixing through my console, my old SSL 4000. That's really the secret. We're triggering a reverb here. And, well, you guessed what I did. I thought if I'm going to use an SSL, I'm going to have the gated reverb sound. It's called a gate verb. SSL, Oxford, England, gate verb. And it's a huge deal. It makes a massive difference. Take it off. Put it on. I mean, it's the sound of the 80s, baby. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Without. Still sounds great. With. Without. You know, if you're going to do the 4000 gated reverb, you might as well use, you know, SSL's own gated reverb. Now, a couple of fun things I did is I took the, and this is not a SSL plugin. Sorry, SSL, it's a Waves one. But I took the Submarine plugin and put it on the floor. So if you listen to the floor tom, now put it on. Just adding this little extra low lows, which is just fantastic there. I love the Submarine. Let's listen to it on the kick. While I was tracking, I was catching compression here. Absolutely love that. Fastest release time, ratio, again, the 3 or 4 to 1 kind of area. Now, I can, if I want, really get that to be aggressive. If I want a total 80s sound, now as far as the low end is concerned, it goes to the 50, 60 kind of area. It's pretty powerful. Okay, it's got about a bit 350. Overdoing it. I could get a little bit more surgical. Go to a little bit of there we go. I mean, that is the sound of kind of an 80s kick. Pretty powerful. All right, let's hear some snare. Don't need that. Nicely gating it. In the full track.
Radio. Let's sway. Wild color lights up your face.
All the backgrounds were sung, compressed and EQ'd with the 4000. And there's me. So the backgrounds were sung by the Sims brothers. It was interesting listening to them in solo. They're very like kind of quite mid-rangey American voices, almost Chicago, but they weren't Chicago. Well, maybe they were, I don't know. The sort of ugliness to them is what makes it really, really work. So my voice, not tuned, imperfect against the absolutely incredible Max. Put them together and I think you get something pretty compelling. It's great. So all I've got is a little bit of verb on that. Literally nothing on the individual because I printed EQ and compression on the way down. All I did was high pass them, so there was a low rubble gone, and then I just probably compressed 2 to 3 dB on the 4000 on the way in, on the 4000 revival on the way in. Compressed, but I just grouped the whole lot together and then stuck SSL's plate verb on it. Back it off. On. And there you go. Instant backgrounds. All the EQ and compression was done on the way in, and I've just got a stereo one just tapping it lightly. Same thing really on the lead vocal. I did use Soothe, sorry, but I did. I love it.
Put on your red shoes and dance.
But then EQ'd here.
Put on your red shoes and dance the blues.
It's using the Austrian Audio OCS 10. Love that mic.
Put on your red shoes and dance the blues.
We're going to listen to the vocal.
Put on your red shoes and dance the blues. To the song they're playing on the radio. Wild color lights up your face.
Nice. And of course, what is great,
Sway through the crowd to an empty space.
the high end on
Put on your red shoes and dance the blues.
on the vocal on SSL is just absolutely superb. Let's broaden this.
To the song they're playing on the radio.
Okay, let's put the DSR.
Wild color lights up your face. Sway through the crowd to an empty space.
Wow.
Put on your red shoes and dance the blues. To the song they're playing on the radio. Wild color lights up your
Put
face.
some more body in there.
Sway through the crowd to an empty space.
So now I've got this inserted on the track.
To the song they're playing on the radio. Let's sway. Color lights up your face. Let's sway. Sway through the crowd to an empty space. Put on your red shoes and dance the blues. Let's dance to the song they're playing on the radio. your face. Let's sway, sway through the crowd to an empty space. Put on your red shoes and dance the blues.
So I hope you're enjoying this video. Of course, you can download the multi-tracks here, and if you're a Produce Like a Pro Academy member, we will be reviewing the mixes. So if you're not yet a member, go down there and join. Come and join us. So got the trusty Strat out here for a bit of Nile Rodgers. I'm sure you've heard me say this before, but I feel like I owe my career to Nile Rodgers because the first professional gig I had was touring playing in a funk band when I was a teenager. And so I'd play The Freak and all the Sister Sledge stuff, and it was so much fun. Chic and Sister Sledge. So, trusty Strat. I've been listening. I don't know what pickup it's on. I'm going to go to the middle. It could be the middle or the neck. I don't think it's the bridge. I don't think it's out of phase. He sounds like he's going through an amp. I decided to really test out the SSL Revival 4000. We would just plug into a DI box and go straight into here. It's going to be a slightly different sound. We could put an impulse response on it afterwards. That could be interesting. Or we could just keep it dry with a bit of delay and a little bit of verb, which is probably what I'm going to do. But I wanted to do it this way because I want you to hear what this sounds like. It's remarkably good on the drums, as you're going to find out when you download it. So let's see what it sounds like on the electric. You can see I'm quite aggressive on the compression. Now obviously that's all going to be done with delay. We're going to mimic it. I'm not going to play I'm actually going to have the delay do it, just like our friend Bob Clearmountain did. No EQ whatsoever, just mic pre, compression, straight in. Two effects now, two more effects that weren't SSL, just because, but they're quite legitimate, especially this first one. Let's go to the rhythm guitar, which is me playing Nile Rodgers' brilliant part. Here it is. So what I did, I just DI'd it into the SSL channel. So it's DI'd into the channel, but I've got one very, very fun thing going on. The DI, I cut some of the mids because I felt like that was the difference between Nile's sound, because I'm sure he was going in, DIing it into the console. If he wasn't, it sounded pretty close to it. But either way, super clean part. But it had like this EQ cut, and I was using my Strat, but I don't have the hit maker like he does. Take the EQ off. Still pretty tasty. But download the multi-tracks, mix it for yourself. But I did put a guitar amp on it. I found like maybe there was... Maybe it was an amp on it after all. So I started with the DI and then I decided to put the amp on it. But regardless, here's the big deal. Clearmountain, Bob Clearmountain does have a plugin, and it's called, made by Apogee, called Let's Dance. So here is without it. Now put this on. There it is. So as you know, Bob Clearmountain came up with that idea on the mix and just put in that ping pong delay, and the rest is history. It's brilliant. Especially with the horns as well. Absolutely superb. Now the horns were played by another Academy member of ours. So we have two Academy members who are playing on this. Produced Like a Pro Academy. We have Chris Ibbotson doing some keys, along with David Bennett, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. But also Michael Garding, who's an incredible sax player, who's played now on several of our things. So I've got SSL X delay on the horns, and I've also got SSL's plate reverb. Absolutely superb. It's just really, really great groove. It's not cut to a click. If there was a click, it's all over the place. I let it breathe. They may have had a click. They may have had, in the 80s, they had this thing called the human clock, which pushed and pulled the tempo. Maybe they did that, but the point is, it just sounds like human beings playing music. It's really fantastic. Again, everything EQ'd and compressed on the way in, even if it's lightly done, high passing, bit of high mid boost where necessary. On the bass, I did a little bit of 80 boost on the DI and a little bit of 80 boost on the amp, just so they sounded great coming in. On the drums, Eric, this is where you can go to the other thing. On the drums, the kick in and the kick out both have a little bit of 60 boost if you listen to it. Boosting more 60 here. Even more 350 cut. Take it off. That's how I printed it. Then the kick out. Together. Now, we only had 8 channels, so we didn't have any stereo rooms. We had kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, floor tom, we're almost there, overhead left, overhead right, 8 mics. But, you know, this was a processed reverb sound, so using that gated verb, etc., gives us the sound we want. No EQ on the hats, no EQ on the overheads. It's just the way we printed it. Slight high passing. That was it. So this is Ray Hearn for Haken playing drums. Absolutely superb drummer. You saw him before on the Audient video we did about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And there in comes Mr. Jamie Humphries. Jamie, as I'm sure you know, was Brian May's guitar player in Brian's band. Jamie's currently on the road with Brit Floyd, who are an absolutely incredible Pink Floyd tribute band, I suppose. I've not seen them live. I've watched them on YouTube, and of course I've spoken to Jamie about it many times, and they are superb. And of course Jamie is a world-class guitar player. Go to Six String Alliance and you'll hear him play there. What happened was I asked him to do it. I was learning it to play on the Strat, but I thought, let's get in, you know, a world-class guitar player to play Stevie Ray Vaughan's part. And I do know that Jamie is he's obsessed with getting things right. However, he was on the road and he tried to film it at a sound check and couldn't get it done and record it at a film check, at a sound check. So I think late at night, he did it in his hotel room. So that footage is from his hotel room, number one. The second thing is he did it with this little tiny Black Star combo. So that is a Black Star combo, and he's using his Music Man, and he just did a fantastic job. Really, really superb job. If I just let solo it, you can hear it. So I haven't done any additional compression whatsoever. It's the sound he gave me. EQ wise, a little bit of 6.5K basically. A little bit of 200 just for a bit of body. That is it. I did do some high passing up to 100 just in case there was any low rumble, which there really wasn't. It just sounds great.
Let's dance, let's dance, let's dance, let's dance, let's dance.
With so much of this, like the drums and all the basics, the guitar, rhythm guitar and bass and everything all tracked using the SSL 4000, and the minimal amount of EQ and compression we've done on it really does, you know, remind us that getting it right at source is the most important thing. Get it right at source. And if you can do that, you can EQ it the way you want going in, you can compress it the way you want going in. Mixing becomes really easy. I guarantee you, when you download these multi-tracks, when you load them up into your DAW of choice, they're all consolidated the same legs, so you won't have any problem spotting them. Once you get them in there and you pull them up, you'll have a mix together pretty darn quickly, which is typical of any of these classic tracks that were done by world-class engineers and incredible musicians. The sounds, the parts were captured at source, and it was mixed as you went almost. You know, so by the time it came to Bob to mix it, he'd already committed to the sounds that he wanted. And then of course he was adding those delays and a few other things. I mean, yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's such a great song and such a wonderful opportunity to be able to do it. Talk about two more things. The great David Bennett put some piano and some Hammond down for us.
Hi, I'm Josh Hills, a UK-based master engineer, and now we're going to master Warren's mixdown. Now, if we take a listen, the very first thing I'm going to do across this mix is a low-end, a low-filtered cut, essentially. And I'm going to do this on the kind of ultra-low frequencies around 20 to 30 hertz. If we take a listen here, there's actually a lot of useful information on the kick from 50 hertz down to 40. You can hear the sub-thump, but as we descend to 30 and below, it just turns to intelligible rumbles. Let's take a listen to that. So there's a sub thump of the kick, and as we go lower, you'll hear it now just turns to rumble. Now, you may be thinking, this doesn't seem like a big deal, why remove it? Well, ultimately, this is going to consume a significant amount of headroom, and it can also force the limiter to attenuate the entire mix, which is something we don't want, so I'm going to remove it. And I often do on this type of music. If it was EDM or electronic music, below 40 hertz is very useful because it can definitely be felt on larger systems, so you want to make sure it's balanced. However, for this genre, I'm just going to cut it. Now, the next thing which really sticks out is the stereo imaging in the low end. It's got some wide elements towards 80, really below 100 hertz, which is making the low end sound quite unfocused in my room. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to balance that. So if we put a low cut here and just put one on the sides, you'll hear the snare and you'll also hear the backing vocals. So let's take a listen. Yeah, backing vocals there. And the snare on 80. So this is just making our stereo image sound quite unfocused towards the low end. So I'm just going to remove this. Excellent. Now, the next thing I'm going to be doing is adding some compression. Now, as you can see, this mix is very, very compressed. It looks like Warren's clipped the drums. However, there's still quite a lot of dynamic information in between the hits. So that being said, I'm not going to be adding the compressor here to actually try and make the drums more consistent. I'm just going to be using it to really bring the transient of the drums in because it's just sounding a little bit kind of overextended to my ears. So let's add a bus compressor and let's dial this in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 2:1 ratio here. You can add full one if you've got kind of like a more mixed elements and you want to get more aggressive with it. But as I said, this is hyper compressed, so this is more about shaping transients. So kind of like 1.51 or 2:1, even up to 3:1 would probably be useful if your compressor allowed it. I'm going to set my attack to 30 milliseconds just to start, and I'm going to bring my release as fast as I can go just to get as much loudness and impact as I can, and just bring my threshold down to maybe half a dB, 1 to 1.5, really 2 to 2.5 dB max here. And I'm also going to bring my sidechain up just to make sure that my subs, especially from the kick, aren't going to be pumping the compressor and I get a more even compression. So let's take a listen.
Let's dance. Let's dance. For fear your grace should fall. Let's dance. For fear tonight is all.
And I'm just going to lower the attack to try and bring that transient in a smidge.
You could look into my eyes. Let's wait under the moonlight, the serious moonlight.
Excellent. So that's just bringing the transients in ever so slightly. I adjusted my makeup gain here at the end just to make sure that it's roughly the same volume when I bypass the compressor, so we can hear the compression. If your compressor's makeup gain isn't matched and it's louder, when you turn the compressor off, this can trick you into thinking that it's better when it's in fact not. So let's now move on to the next stage. So now I've got my compression done, I'm going to add a bit of EQ. Now this mix is sounding quite dark to me, just subtly dark, so I'm just going to brighten it up a little bit, and it also sounds like it's lacking clarity in our low mids around maybe that 100 to 300 range. So I'm just going to put a strategic cut around there to try and clean it up. Let's take a look at let's keep on the IK multimedia vibe, because I know I really like that compressor. Let's try their EQ. So here we go. Let's first try and brighten up a little bit. Now, a few things about this plugin. This is our cue here at the top. These are our belly keys. We've got our shelves on the left-hand side. If I put my EQ up to 15, this is a narrow cue. If I go to 5, naturally, as you know, this is a wider cue. So let's now dial this in and try and get it a bit brighter.
Let's dance. Let's dance. For fear your grace should fall. Let's dance. For fear tonight is all. Let's wait. You could look into my eyes.
Okay, so that's adding a nice little bit of brightness. Let's try the shelf and see how that sounds with our cuts. I boosted around 1K here, and I've boosted it really, really wide, kind of boost as well, a little bit higher, kind of like 7.5. So hopefully now when I add the shelf, that should brighten up the whole top end and underneath these boosts.
Let's wait under the moonlight, the serious moonlight.
Okay, that's sounding good. Let's now find that kind of like muddy, kind of boxy sound in the low mids and see what that is. Let's see if we can find that.
And if you say run, I'll run with you. And if you say hide, we'll hide. Because my love.
Okay, that's sounding good. 1.5 dB here just sounds like it's taking too much out. And now I've cut this range around 200. It's actually sounding a little bit too bright, so I'm just going to take the shelf off and readjust this. I'm also going to take a little bit more of the low end out because it's sounding a smidge overextended here on the system.
For you would break my heart in two. If you should fall into my arms and drown.
Okay, so that's sounding good. Now, the next thing I'm going to add is a tape machine. This track is from the 80s. So let's put some tape on. I'm not going to be using the tape really to add a lot of color. The main goal here is just some more subtle compression because loudness is the aim of the game. And those kick transients are really far out of the mix. So I just want to bring them in a little bit. I'm just going to keep using IK Metal Media, I think. So let's use this plugin. Now what I've got here, I've got different kind of tape options which I can use. You'll see these on UAD plugins and a lot of different kind of like tape plugins. It's pretty straightforward. You'll see a lot of the different tape formulas. So for example, like the 250 tape formula, this is based off the Scotch tape. It's modeled after the Scotch 250 formula, I should say, which went into production around the 70s, and it's a very colored tape sound. It's got quite an obvious distortion and saturation and EQ curve to it. The 456 was made, I believe, by Ampex, so this formula was considered, I guess you could say, the tape sound. It's quite a round tone with a slight touch of saturation. But this is, I guess, a lot of people refer to as, the quintessential tape sound in plugins. I'm not sure if I agree with it. And then we've got the 499, for example. Here's another one. This is also based off Ampex, and this was one of their most transparent formulas. So yeah, you pick the formula one. I want to keep this quite transparent because really I'm using this more for compression than I am the sound of tape. So I'm going to keep the IPS inches per second quite fast at 15. If I go to 7.5, yet again, I want to impart more color. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just add some bias here, which is just going to really impart the tone of the tape machine onto our mixed out. So let's take a listen.
Let's dance.
So you can hear it straight away. 250, as I said, very, very that Scotch kind of emulation. It's very, very coloured, a very obvious distortion. I'm really liking the 456 kind of like tape sound, but I do think I'm going to keep just this one for the 499 because it's super transparent, and then I can really just get the compression out of the tape machine.
Let's dance. For fear tonight is all. You could look into my eyes. Let's wait.
And there you go. It's smoothing out those peaks and adding a little bit more perceived loudness and compression across it. Now, finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish with a limiter. I'm going to skip the soft clipping here. So this track was released in the 80s. This is before things got really silly with the loudness awards and kind of overly loud and hyper compressed. Things are still loud. I believe this track was mastered to about -10 LUFS, but I'm just going to play it on ear today. Now, when limiting, what you want to do is just make sure that you've got the unity gain, if your limiter has one, enabled. This means that when I turn the limiter up and down, it's going to keep the volume exactly the same, so you can really hear the effects of the limiter. So I'm just going to show you that. I'm going to turn this on and then turn the input up until it sounds absolutely distorted and destroyed.
Let's dance.
So you can see here, this really lets us listen to what the limiter is doing without loudness tricking our brains. So let's turn it up until we get a decent amount of kind of gain reduction. And I'm going to try and keep this as transparent as possible. Naturally, when you add a limiter, it is going to make things sound somewhat smashed. So I'm just going to dial this in until I get a good balance. It's a trade-off between loudness and having it sound overly squashed, depending how loud you want to go. So we're just going to basically dial this into taste.
Let's dance. For fear your grace should fall. Let's dance.
So you can hear this is a lot of limiting. It's really killed the dynamics and you're getting that squashed aesthetic. If you like that, you can go for it and keep it here. I'm actually going to back it off a little bit because I think it's a bit too much and it's ruining Warren's mix too much for me.
Let's dance. Let's dance. For fear your grace should fall. Let's dance. For fear tonight is all. Let's wait. You could look into my eyes.
Excellent, and that's now sounding good to me. So that's how I'd approach the mastering for this track. As you can see, I've not really done anything really that impressive. I've just done my best to showcase the mix and as best as I can. get it loud, make sure that I've maintained the quality of the mix and the balance. As a mastering engineer, I try my best to not really change the mix too much. What I find is mixing engineers tend to not like it when you drastically change their mix. My main goal here is just getting it loud, polishing up any flaws within the mix, and making sure that it's well presented. So thanks for watching.
Here at the top of the channel strip are my routing switches now. And this means that basically I can mult signals out to multiple buses at the same time. That's because people started to use these track buses, especially if they weren't tracking, as additional effects ends. So basically you could pick up a signal on the small fader, send the small fader to the track bus routing, and then send this off to additional effects devices. So in a world...
This is revolutionary for me.
Yeah.
That's what I loved about mine. Yeah.
And then the other use that people would make from them is they'd send stuff up to these and use them as audio subgroups.
Oh yeah, I use them for everything. Yeah. Everything you're saying I did. I mean, it's great. I was sending for parallel compression stuff and then coming back wherever I wanted, either on fader or back end returns. You name it.
The sort of channel layout is very similar in terms of its mic amp here.
Yeah.
Here is the sort of what is now a much more sort of classic E-series dynamics unit, but as I say, the benefit now of this design was its independence from the fader, basically. And as you spotted when we were talking earlier, there would be
no VCA.
There's a fader VCA card here, but the dynamics is actually done in a separate card. So this card has got its own VCA. So this gold thing here is the thing that's the RMS to DC converter, and the VCA is one of these chips in the VCA is here, basically. That's a DBX 2151. So this was kind of, so this was the evolution of those cans.
So it came from a 202, which is about this big, down to that.
But the some of the benefits of that were, I mean, fundamentally, when you miniaturize the electronics, you can reduce things like resistances. You can reduce in some ways its performance was.
Will it be heat too?
Yeah, heat too. Yeah. And as I say, the 202X, which was the kind of larger version of this 2151 design, was basically, when you looked at it, it was multiple of these in.
Was that when they went gold as well?
No, they by the time they were doing the X, they'd taken the can off altogether, basically. I think that's partly just because they didn't need the shielding any longer.
Okay.
But yeah, that's this is the 2151, and as I say, this is a sort of self-contained dynamics unit, so it doesn't relate to the fader VCA whatsoever any longer. But that means that you can do switching of it in part. You can put it in different paths. You can also sort of send filters or EQs to the side chain, so you could start to do, I mean, although it doesn't have a specific DS.
See, it says DBX on it now from this angle.
Yeah.
It's just insane to think that is your compressor, basically. There it is. That is it. There's all this electronics around that controls what actions it takes, but that's at least when it was this big, you felt like.
Yeah, indeed.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there are other things that are, so this is an E-series EQ. So the early consoles, SSL talks about numbers quite a lot in terms of cards. And that's just simply because typically these cards would each have a part number. That part number would be 6 odd digits, but people would talk about it in the context of the last 3 digits, basically. So you'd have like a 142 as an input card, or you'd have a 242 as the EQ card. The VCA is a 10 card, but basically the E-series EQ is what the E-series channel strip had, and by the time certainly, so this I would say is a sort of, I would say this is a early 80s channel strip, and I could kind of tell that partly because it's gone away from that completely raw finish. So now this has been manufactured by a printed circuit board manufacturer, as opposed to kind of hand laid and exposed and etched on in someone's kitchen to a certain extent. And then there's the auxiliary sends are more sophisticated, and because we don't have this routing stuff down the bottom of the channel strip, the small fader section here is a lot closer to the operator, basically. So you end up with a sort of classic SSL large fader, small fader layout. I was just going to point out just one little thing, which is another evolution between B series and E series, basically, which was the Keynote viewer might notice that these pots have changed, and that is because these have become Clarostat pots with an extra wafer on each one of the pots, and that extra wafer allowed us to do the total recall. So that was another big change from B series to E series, was that
So it's like a little wafer.
exactly. So yeah, the extra wafer basically allows us to read the position of the pot, which is then scanned on a scanning card that normally.
Okay, so did the B have any kind of recall capabilities? So the E was the birth of recall.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
What was the birth of flying faders?
So automation, as we called it, was moving faders that we introduced with G series consoles. Okay. So that comes comes in the next stage of the story, actually. Keen SSL enthusiasts, what they may notice is that although I'm talking about this as a G series channel strip, which indeed it is, it's coloured the same colour as an E series channel strip.
Okay.
So G series consoles typically had a lighter grey finish, and they had sort of pastel colours in the EQ section. This, although it has G series electronics, it's actually coloured the same as an E series console. But
This is what I think mine look like. This is what's really confusing me.
possibly. I mean, so in some of the technical differences between the two, I mean, fundamentally, if you look at this from any kind of distance, you think, well, actually, it's very similar to the E-series channel strip we were just looking at. And you kind of have to know what you're looking for to see the differences. But one of the sort of key differences was the mic amp. So in a G-series console, instead of having a continuously variable mic amp, it's now got a stepped mic amp gain control. And that was basically because we used a kind of super matched transistor pair on the input, which again gave us good common mode rejection ratio and fantastically low noise performance. So yeah, this is a G series mic pre, and then the other big difference is actually in the EQ section. So this is a G series EQ, and the sort of big difference between an E series EQ and the G series EQ was repurposing of the mid band. So for a start, the filter slope is different. So E series has a first order filter slope on the high and low frequency sections, and G series has got a second order, so it's got a steeper slope on the LF and HF bands. And then in the mid frequencies, the earlier E series EQs, the high and low shelf sections had bell switches that basically switched to a fixed Q bell characteristic for high and low sections. Whereas in G series, what we actually did was we put a divide by 3 and a times by 3 switch for the mid bands. So basically we moved this kind of fully parametric, so gain, frequency and Q control up into what is the HF section or down into what is the LF section. So it was, I mean, to a certain extent, that kind of concept was inherited from Focusrite, basically, because if you looked at some of the early Focusrite EQs, they had a divide by 3 and a times by 3, but they also actually had bell switches, I think, in the HF and LF section. So G series and E series, and there's a difference in the way that the gain and the Q interact in the G series and the E series as well. So there's actually quite a lot of differences, despite the fact that they kind of look similar. Interesting to just look here at so this is the VCA card for the fader, and here is a 202X VCA. So this basically, all these, you probably might not be able to pick it up on the camera, but basically these vertical stripes here are all loads and loads of these 2151 dBx VCAs in parallel. So they go to make up the 202X. So whereas the 202C, and so the black and the gold cans are discrete designs that are encapsulated and with 10 cans on the top, the 202X became a sort of modularized version of this and multiple version of this 20.
I want to go back to my console and pull it apart and try and figure out what, because it seems like a hodgepodge of all different dates of things.
I mean, that's one of the things that's interesting about this whole card design was that fundamentally quite a lot of these cards they fitted in the same slots. So I mean, it was possible to, I mean, you could get a G series console fitted with E series EQs, or you could buy a G series retrofit for E series EQs. So basically what that would involve is that you took this card out, which was, so this is a 292, which is a G series EQ. You took it out, you put a 242, which was the later of the E series EQs in. You'd change a couple of these knobs in the front panel, and now you'd have an E series EQ instead of a G series EQ in your console. So there was quite a lot of, I mean, quite a lot that went on in terms of people. I mean, we certainly had consoles where they'd be like half E series and half G series in terms of the.
Yeah, I think we had 3 different EQs.
Yeah, that's quite possible because the other.
Black, brown.
Yeah, so the brown is the original O2 EQ, which was kind of a bit noisy, had a bit of character, and certainly in the very early designs, the bands had interaction as well. So as you adjusted the gain of one band, it would interact with one of the other bands. We later fixed that by basically putting a center tap on the gain.
And all the other guys were old school.
Yeah.
They fixed it, but I prefer the original.
Yeah, which is why in some of our in some of the various sort of channel strip modules that we've done, you can simulate and switch that on and off basically. So if you see an E series module with CT in it, CT stands for center tap, and it switches on and off that center tap on the gain control. There's one other thing that's quite interesting about the very early E series dynamics, and that was it was designed around a different VCA than the DBX VCA that the later E series and then G series used.
Covering the revival,
Yeah.
we'd sort of touched upon the fact that we'd done a discrete Class A replication of the A. What was the AFX originally?
VCA originally, yeah, exactly.
That's the thing I want to understand. So it was AFEX.
Yeah,
That because I thought it was always the 202.
the Fader VCA is always DBX and has always been a 202 variant. The dynamics in the very earliest E series dynamics, it was an AFEX VCA, and that became discontinued fairly quickly, and so we replaced it with DBX, and that was one of the sort of slightly quirky things about that replacement was we almost kind of dropped in with a few component changes that DBX VCA into where the AFX would bond, but actually there were some slightly different characteristics of both of those VCAs. So, and that's why when we went to design some of the sort of revisions of early E series consoles, we actually redesigned, so that AFX VCA was a Class A VCA, and the only way we could replicate it was literally design the circuit again in discrete components to give us that sort of early sound, which is what Andy was talking about in terms of,
And that's the one we characterize as being grabbier, being more aggressive. So download the multi-tracks, mix it for yourself, have some fun with it. I thoroughly enjoyed working with the SSL 4000. We often convince ourselves because of like 90s, 2000s, well, early 2000s and 90s, that everything was always tracked on a large format console and, like a Neve or an API or something, and then mixed on SSL. We forget that so many of the records that we grew up loving and listening to were actually recorded and mixed on SSL 4000s. I was thinking about doing some Peter Gabriel stuff, for instance, which was done like that. But instead we went for this, and I'm really glad we did it. Highly, highly recommend these channels. I don't know what they retail at the moment, but bearing in mind a 4000 when it came out new was probably about $250,000 or pounds or whatever. They were so expensive. The fact that you can get them now, I don't know, let's have a look. Yeah, they're about £1,500, about $2,000 for a channel. I think one would probably do 90% of your work. A stereo pair would be amazing. It's just a really, really great channel. Very, very impressed. Thank you ever so much, SSL, for sending over all 8 channels. We are getting 4. I'm not getting 8. That's a little bit too far out of the budget, but we're getting 4. So thanks for sending them over so we could try. Please download the multi-tracks down below and have a marvellous time recording and mixing.